it possible to replace your traditional tools with just an iPad? I've taught over 3,500 architects using the Apple Pencil, and this is my ultimate beginner's guide to Morpholio Trace that will completely transform the way you work. And we'll cover everything from the interface, the settings, to must-know features, and common pitfalls to avoid. So grab your iPad and let's dive in. So when you open up Morpholio Trace for the first time, you're gonna get into this view. And this is what I call the home page. And you can see I have everything organized into projects and folders, so you can identify the project names or the type of work that I'm currently working on. I also have a folder called Archive, which is everything that's already been done from prior work that I don't really need to look at for a long time. Yours may actually look a little different. So if I remember correctly, you're gonna get prompted to select the kind of designer you are. And based on what you choose, let's say a landscape designer, your interface might be loaded with some landscape case study files that you can open up and see some of the file structure. Later on, you can really spend the time to organize your projects once you have a little bit more file in the system. But the very first thing I want to point you to is this panel on the left, which you can minimize and open. So let's go ahead and just go to the setting and let's just take a look at some specific ones that I think you need to be watch out for. Some of these are kind of self-explanatory, so I won't really go over in depth. So these are the settings that are really turned on by default. I don't really need to touch or move, nor have I ever really toggled them off in the past. One toggle that I currently have as off is the stack layer. And this is an important one because it has to do with how the layer is created inside a project. So if yours is currently turned on, what that will mean is the layer that you create every time will be in the exact same size as the layer below it. You find yourself in a situation where you can't zoom in and create a small layer or zoom out and create a bigger layer. This is responsible for that. Another toggle that is important is this zoom rotation lock. So when you have this turned on, what this will do is you're not going to be able to move your canvas or actually to rotate your canvas freely, and the rotation is locked to the same view. And this is useful, let's say, when you're using Morpholio Trace on site, you're marking up drawings. You don't really want to have this ability to move your PDFs freely. It's just a little bit annoying. So if I'm in that situation, I'm on site, I'm doing redlining, I'm just taking notes, I'll have this turned on so my digital canvas is not going to rotate accidentally. If I pinch something or if I just move my fingers a little bit, it's not going to move around. This edit image button is also important. Right now it's currently set to on, and that's what I recommend. This toggle is also something that you can switch on when you are inside a project. You can see I currently have a logo for myself. So this is a logo that you can upload directly from your gallery, and you can have this display in their default title block, which is not what I use. So this is not really an important feature for me, but I'll show you what this title block looks like later on. And feel free to explore the rest of this menu, many of which are pretty self-explanatory just by reading it, like the layer color, the background color, and the background transparency in case you're left-handed. And there's also a toggle for imperial or metric, which can be toggled on inside the project setting. And then there is also a toggle for imperial or metric, which you can also switch when you're inside a drawing session. And you can see the version of Trace that I have is called Trace Pro, which is $20 a year. And this basically gives me everything I need. And if I had to make a recommendation, this is the version that most designers or actually professionals would want to get. Okay, so let's go back to our project. Now, the next control I want to look at is this 4-quadrant rectangle here. So this is going to let you sort the file or the folder by the name, kind, date, created, modified. Honestly, this is not something that I, use that often. I think I probably just have it by date created. So the most recent ones will be closer to me on the top left corner. And this folder option is important. So if I tap on this, this is going to allow you to create a new folder. So let me just go ahead and create a test folder for you. So let's call this test 1. So when you have different individual projects, you can organize them into this folder by just tapping and dragging it into the folder. And once you are inside the folder, what you'll see is all the individual drawing files that are available to you. At any point, you can use the select button to select one or multiple of these files, and you can move them back to the page before. You can duplicate, copy, export, group, and delete. So these are pretty self-explanatory in general. And as you can see, you can even group things within a group. So if I just nest this right here and I call this test 2, you're gonna see this is a folder that's nested within this folder. So I don't really want to do that. So what I'll do is I'm gonna go back, and as a way to demonstrate the move back function, I'm gonna click on 3 of these and I'm gonna say move back. So this will get me to that previous interface. And this test 2, which I accidentally called it rest2, I'm going to go ahead and delete this folder. So that leaves us this last cross button right here, and this is a important one. And when I fire this up, this may look intimidating at first because there's so many options to start a new project. We can start a project with a blank sheet of paper. We can use this custom button, which is a little mysterious, and actually took me a while to figure out exactly how to use this. We can bring a photo from our gallery, and this PDF is probably pretty self-explanatory because we can just bring in a PDF file from somewhere else. And the map function has to do with the Apple Maps by typing an address. So you can bring in the Apple Map to scale. The import, camera, paper, AR are things that are rarely used for me. So I'm not even going to get into that. This paper icon, just FYI, this is not something that you should be considering, because I believe this is a fairly outdated menu, and it's even more confusing once you actually get into this. So what this does is this paper will actually just give you a gridded paper. The grids are not to scale. It's really just a graphical way of overlaying this on a empty layer. So really, it's really meaningless, and I don't recommend you create a drawing using this paper option. This AR option is something that may be useful to you. Personally, I never got a chance to use it, and not many of my students are actually using that too. However, this 3D feature is useful when you have a SketchUp 3D model or Rhino model that you can import and use the live sketching feature to sketch on top. That is probably one of the best part about Morpholio Trace that everyone really loves. So if I were to start a project from scratch, the 2 choices that I would naturally go to is, if I have a PDF that I need to bring in here, I might be tempted to just use this PDF function to import the PDF. However, I think a better way to bring in a PDF is actually using this custom option. So if you already have an existing PDF, let's say a PDF, the house plan, what I'll do here is I will go to my cloud drive, and this cloud drive can be synced up to your Dropbox or Google Drive or even iCloud. So in my case, I actually have it synced to my Dropbox for most of my files. And I'm actually going to load in this as-built floor plan, and it's going to take me a second to fire this up. So the next option is to select the scale. So Morpholio Trace will actually do a nice thing, which is to recognize the size of the PDF. So this particular set of PDF is set to 24 by 36 inch paper, which is RD size in the United States. And most of the pages in here that I know are 1/4 inch. Now there are some pages that are 1/8 or even smaller, but for the most of the pages, let's just give it a 1/4 inch size. So let's go ahead and use this gallery button to preview all the pages that we have in the set, which is really nice, right? So you can also zoom in to have a bigger preview of each of the pages, and you can zoom out to get a smaller preview. So for example, if we were to start a drawing on this particular floor plan, which is scale to 1/4 inch, and if you don't believe me, I can simply open this up and zoom in, and I'll take my scale ruler, which is one of the best features about Morpholio Trace. I can put it right next to the end of this wall, and I'm going to count about 14.5 according to this ledger right there. This is exactly about 14.5 feet according to the scale ruler. So this just confirms that this page was brought in correctly at the 1/4 inch scale. And now anytime we're drawing, we're actually drawing 1:1 like you would in AutoCAD. model space. Now there's also a menu bar on the bottom that you can go to other pages in this PDF. However, what you'll notice is if you go to a page that is not in the 1/4 inch, so let's say in this site plan which was actually drawn at an 1/8 inch, what this will do is you'll find that this scale ruler that was calibrated for the 1/4 inch will not work for this 1/8 inch. So a good example of this is if I put it right next to the end of this property line, which is 100 feet according to this survey, what you'll see on my ruler reading is this is actually reading at 50 feet, right? And that is incorrect because we calibrated this particular sheet at 1/4 inch. So how do we fix that? So there is another way that you can calibrate manually once you are in a PDF, and that is using the calibrate tool. So under project setup, you have this scale symbol, right? So in here, if you click onto this set scale, we can actually use 2 ends of a known dimension to manually calibrate the scale of something. So here, I'm gonna zoom in a little closer. I'm gonna point one end of my cross and the other end of my cross here. And I'm going to calibrate manually based on this 100 feet dimension. So given that I am in Imperial, I am going to type in 100 feet and I'm going to click on OK. Ideally, you want to use the longest dimension to calibrate something. And this is not too bad. So 100 feet is fairly long in my opinion. So now if you use the same scale ruler, and I'm just going to hide my controls a little bit. And if you zoom out a little bit more, you can see that this scale ruler is calibrated for this particular page. Now, remember, it's just for this page, not for other pages. So this scale that we just manually calibrated is only affecting this page. So this is what I like to do when I bring in a existing PDF generated from AutoCAD or ArchiCAD or Revit. This is a kind of a fail-proof way of calibrating the drawing by importing it as a custom option. So if for any reason you didn't know that this option was available to you and you actually brought in the PDF using this PDF icon, which is totally fine, we can just do the same thing of bringing the drawing. It's actually going to come in exactly the same, except now when you go to any of these pages, it came in without being calibrated. So what this means is, let me go to any of the floor plans, for example. So remember how we didn't assign a scale to any of these drawings? So if I pull up the same scale ruler, this is scaleless. So you will still have to go to your calibration tool and take 2 ends of something that you know of. So this, in this case, 29 feet and 3 inches, and the other end of this wall, and then punching 29 and 3 inches. So you can do this in case you accidentally brought in the PDF not using the set scale way or using the custom way. So now that we're actually inside this drawing interface, let's go over some of the things that we have going around here. So on the very left side, you have the brush palette, basically what I like to call it. You can set each of these brushes individually if you want to. So there's really only 10, 11 brushes Morpholio Trace offers, and there's really just 3 to 4 that I personally like to use. And you can set each of these brushes to be their own brush, which is really convenient. Now, I'm not really going to get into the advantage or what I don't like about each of the brush. That's for another video, but just know that you have this 11 brushes or so, and each brush color, if you set it to a color, it will actually remember the same color when you toggle back like this. And then here we have the eyedropper. You can sample a color from somewhere that if you need to. And if you expand this color option, we have the color wheel, which you can customize the color even more. And you can see in the default color palette, there's a lot of palette from different creators. So you might already find something that you like. I actually never gone through the process of creating my own color palette. I just started off with somebody else's color palette. For example, I think the one I use a lot is, this landscape color palette is a good starting point. So if I want just to use boat color palette, I'm just going to select yes, and this is going to loading all the colors from this creator. Now in the brush control, which there's not a lot of options, so I do want to show you some of the things that we have available. This is really the size of the pen. You can go as small as 0.1, and they have an article on this in the website. And generally, there's really just a couple of sizes that you need. And this is controlling the opacity of the pen. And if you open up this 3 dots, these are a couple of useful sliders. So for example, this smoothness control will dictate how smooth your pen is. So if I go ahead and dial this all the way to this other end, what you'll find is this pen has really just like a unrealistic kind of a smoothness to it. And this is good when you're drawing, let's say, like a curve or something that's round. You may not want to have the the normal shakiness of your hand to really be a factor in that. And if you dial this all the way to the other end, this is really going to pick up every bit of nuance that your hand has. So this is going to be the most realistic and reflective of your true drawing style. This pen bleed option, don't really care, don't really use it a lot, so I just leave it all the way to the 100%. The thing that you really need to remember is the smoothness control. This will come handy in many cases. Okay, like I said, this is really simple, right? And there's really not a lot of options for you to tweak around, so I can actually minimize this. On the right hand is your layer palette, and this is probably a little bit more complicated, but not scary at all. So you can expand the layer palette like this using the 2 arrow, and it's going to show you the name of the layer. So to have a good practice, you kind of want to name your layers accordingly, so it makes finding things easier. And as you can tell, there's only 2 layers right now, so that's not really a big issue. You also have a text tool, which is not great right now. They're working something to fix that very soon. There's a dimension tool, which is actually really useful if you want to dimension your drawings. You can also bring in a photo or a texture to overlay on top of your drawing, and this is creating a new layer. So I'm going to just minimize this so we can see more of the same thing here, just more compact. And if you want to create a new layer, a simple way to do that is just to, you can zoom in or zoom out, and the layers that you create will be based off on the extent of the zoom or whatever your iPad can see. So if I zoom in a lot like this, if I create a layer just in this area, what you'll see is my new layer is created just in this area. And just to make it a little bit more legible or obvious, I'm gonna make this layer orange or yellow, and there's another orange that you can use too, and this is going to just cover this area. And there's a lot of benefit when you're creating a more zoomed in layer, which means in short, you're going to get a higher quality line drawing and pixel density. Whereas if you zoom out and you create a layer that's probably way bigger than you need to, and this layer, as we can see, we can also make this yellow, and you can see the extent of this layer by double tapping on the layer itself. You can see how big this layer is, right? And when you're trying to draw on such a big layer like this, what you're going to experience is a lot of heavy pixelation. So I'm going to zoom in on here, and you can see when I'm drawing something, this is not going to be as crisp. Your line weight are not going to be as crisp as when you're drawing in a more zoomed in layer. And that has to do with how the Morpholio Trace app is set up. So each layer has a default size of 4,000. So just to really trying to showcase this. So let's imagine this entire trace paper has a 4,000 resolution, which is also 4K. So the amount of density in drawing is spread out across this entire page. Whereas if you had a layer that is way more zoomed in, you're going to get the same, this is way too big, you're going to get the same 4K quality spread across a much smaller area, which is going to make having drawing details or just drawing very fine level details really crisp and sharp. This is a very important concept that you have to understand in Morpholio Trace. So just remember, you have 4,000, it's widest, and the size of the layer will impact the drawing resolution and how pixelated your drawing will eventually get. And in each layer, you can also expand using this 3 button right here. And this is going to give you another level of control that you absolutely will need. And one of them is this paper opacity. So this controls how much of the paper, like real trace paper, is going to show the layer below. Unlike real paper, right? This is completely adjustable, so you can have it all the way down to 0 and only show the line weights, or you can show it all the way up. And when you create a new layer, there is going to be a new layer opacity created for this new trace paper by default. So you can see by default, it's somewhere in this middle. And let's take a look at what other controls we'll have. One other thing that's really important is this blending mode option. So if you're coming from Photoshop, this should be pretty familiar to you. By default, we are given these blending modes that we can blend using the layer themselves. And the most common one that I would say is this multiply. And this multiply is really, if you have it on multiply, you can see the effect of from normal. So normal is where we're going to see the effect of the trace paper, whereas multiply, we are going to hide the effect of trace paper. And this is just one of many useful blending modes that are available to us. Other ones you can do is you can actually scale your layer. So by turning this on, what you can do is you can make this trace paper larger or smaller. However, you are actually scaling the drawing or the objects that are within this layer. So that's something to watch out for. You can also clear this paper like this, delete, you can copy, duplicate, mirror, and mirror vertically, which are pretty self-explanatory. So these are the layer control or layer actions that you need to be familiar with. And there's really not that many of them, but the important ones to remember is this paper opacity, the blending mode, and perhaps the copy and duplicate. Okay, now we are on this top left-hand corner. So let's just go from left to right. The first one is we're exiting the project, so let's not do that. And the second one is something that we've seen before, and this is a preview of all the PDF pages that we have in this PDF set. Again, you can zoom in, you can zoom out. There is a feature under the edit, you can select individual or a number of them. You can delete these pages entirely from the set, or you can duplicate and create a new blank page if you wish. So that's really useful to know. Something that I wish Morpholio Trace does better is giving you this ability to flip through a drawing with a wipe of a hand or swipe of a finger. So something that they've introduced lately is this sliding bar on the bottom. So you can go toggle through different pages like this. And if you want to kind of like hide this control, you can just single tap to hide. If you want to hide it completely, they actually have a preference here called PDF slider. So if you toggle this off completely, that menu bar will just go away completely. So I typically leave this on because, if I want to hide it, it just kind of docks everything to this left bottom corner. So in this range icon, there's a couple of important things that we really looked at. One of them is setting the scale. The units, you can go from imperial to metric at any time, and you can also show a grid behind each paper. So the beauty of this is actually, if you turn this on, this grid by default is at 4 feet. So essentially each square is 4 foot in length, which is not particularly useful. I actually like to set mine at 1 foot apart. So if I toggle 1 foot, you can see as I zoom into the paper, you can see each grid is 1 foot, and this can be really useful just to give you a sense of scale as you're sketching through things. You can be counting the number of squares to give you a sense of square feet and area. And some finer controls that are in here is you can definitely change the color of the grid or how intense the grid is. So I like to usually have mine to set halfway, so it's not kind of competing with this background cat layer. So this is definitely something that you'll want to use at some point in the future. So for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to leave this on. And also a couple of other things that you want to watch out for is, of course, this is a video time lapse recording. By default, it's turned off. You can turn it on and make this drawing or everything that you do is sort of a marketable short if you want. So that's basically the control, is just having it on and off. There's not really a whole lot of things that you can tweak around. And under preference, this is kind of important. It's more of a visual thing. So one of the things is turning off this layer drop shadow, which when you do turn it off, you can see the shadow behind each layer has gone away. So you know what? I'm actually going to turn off this background grid so that this is a little bit more clear. If you have this turned on, you can see there is just a slight hint of shadow around each layer to show you that that's the size of the layer. So for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to create 2 layers, and half of this layer is going to be occupying half of this page, and this other half is going to occupy this other half of the page. And you can see at this point right now, I'm getting these overlapping lines from both layers, which is a little distracting visually. So to make that a little easier visually for yourself, I can just turn off this layer shadow. So now the layer shadow is gone, but actually my 2 layers are still overlapping each other. So the other thing you might want to do is just to turn both of the layer opacity to 0. So when you are drawing, it feels like you're drawing on a single layer, but in fact, you're actually drawing on 2 different layers. Let's take a look at the rotation snap. This has more to do with when you're rotating a page. Right now, you're kind of rotating it freely, and you can see, I don't know if you can see this. This is a rotation. It's showing you the amount of rotation, and it's not snapping to, let's say, a 90-degree angle. If you have this turned on, this will snap to, let's say, orthogonally and a certain maybe 45 degrees. And this edit image toggle is kind of important. So when you have this turned on, this is going to allow you to actually bring in a external image. So let's say I'm going to bring in this brick texture, right? And I'm just gonna make this a little bit smaller. I'm gonna hit on my check mark. So when this edit image toggle is on, it's going to allow you to select, oops, that's not my selection tool. It's going to allow you to select any part of this image. For example, you can move it around, you can delete it, you can even transform it. There's a couple of controls from transform from 2D to distort and whatnot. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like in distort. So this might be helpful when you're creating a texture in 3D, in sort of a 3D perspective view. So if for some reason this is not working, that probably means your edit image toggle is turned off. So when it is turned off, you're not going to be able to select areas that you want to delete out of this image that you just brought in, or to transform it into a different shape. And speaking of this transform tool that we're using right now, you can select using a free transform. So a free transform is selecting anything that you're kind of like using your pen around, or you can do more of a polygonal selection like this. This is probably what we're more used to in AutoCAD. You can do a circle and a rectangle. So these are things that you can do to select something very quickly. Now let's go to this middle layer bar. Some of this I won't get to, like this AR feature that I never really used myself. Now I think this second option is a lot more useful. This is your area calculation tool, or you can use it to fill a pattern. And this may look a little complicated at first, but it's really not. So when you click on that, you'll see it comes with this little, I guess, like a sniper image tool. So you can hover it in an area, and it's going to recognize the boundary of that area. So if I tweak the tolerance, which I think is set to too far. So if I set the tolerance all the way down, you can see it is currently recognizing the area just waiting here. And the reason why it's spilling into this master bedroom is because I don't have a closed polyline. So this will only work if it detects a completely closed polyline, and having this tolerance control will help with that. So this can really give you a quick area takeoff. So in here, if our drawing is calibrated correctly, in here you can see it's about 270 square feet. I've used this quite frequently to do FAR calculation and to do these very simple back of the napkin math without going into AutoCAD. So I would say this is a top feature in Morpholio Trace, cross-discipline for architects, interior designers, and landscape architects. Almost everyone would really benefit using this tool. Now, if your goal is to not use this area calculation, but if you just want to fill the room or area with a pattern, what you can also do is you can select any of the hatches that are currently available. So let's just pick maybe this tile looking pattern that comes with by default. Unfortunately, at this point, we're not going to be able to create or customize our own pattern for ourselves. So you're really going to rely on what's existing and maybe just use it as a placeholder and call it something else with text. But these are available to you from architecture, landscape, and interior design. So let's say if this is the color that we want to fill our, our master bathroom and our master bedroom, we can also customize the color of this. We can customize the opacity. We can also customize the density, which might be helpful. So maybe probably this density makes more sense. And once you are ready, you can click on this fill tool. And basically what this is doing is it's filling this area with this pattern that you just selected on a layer by itself. So you can see if I click out of this feature, now this is a pattern that will really just live in this area. What I would recommend is if for some reason your pattern or your area calculation tool isn't working, just make sure you actually have a closed loop that will really work well once it detects that there is a closed polyline that encapsulates the area that you're trying to fill. Okay, so next tool is our perspective tool, which doesn't really work in this example. So let's go to a different project. So I'm in another project where I've already set the perspective for a 1-point vanishing point for this drawing. So you can see that everything is pointed towards this 1-point vanishing point. But if I had to start from scratch, it's very similar. What you'll see is you can set your perspective using either 1-point, 2-point, or 3-point. Most of the time, honestly, I never use 3-point. It's just too many vanishing point for my own taste. 2-point is more than enough. So you can actually use any of these 2 points, or you can find the vanishing point if you have a 2-point perspective and then just place it where the vanishing point is. So when this is set up, like I have right here for a single vanishing point, so I'm actually going to undo and I'm going to show you, oh no, this is actually, I've tweaked the vanishing point myself, so I really shouldn't have done that. So let me just go ahead and set the vanishing point again from where it should have been is about right here. So when this is set up correctly, you can kind of see there is a very faint vanishing lines that are all converging to this point, right? So you can use it as a guide, which visually, when you have it turned on, this is a guide. And when you have the assistive feature turned on, what this will do is it will help you to draw everything leading to this vanishing point. So if I were to just do something a little crazy, if I would pick a pink or purple-ish color, let me just go ahead and create a new layer. So everything I draw on here can easily be pointed to this point. So this just makes drawing in perspective so much easier when you don't have to, do so much of the legwork. So, and this is really how this sketch is quickly created using this vantage point. Of course, this is a 1-point example. You can easily create the same thing for a 2-point perspective, and I have many examples in my tutorial that shows you how to do that. Okay, so let's go back to this example. And we really looked at the scale ruler, right? So the scale ruler will contract and expand based on your zoom extent, which is what makes this super powerful. And there's actually a couple of things that you might need to watch out for is assisted. So assisted just means when you have this turned on, you're gonna be able to draw orthogonally. When you have it turned off, you can draw freehand, but you're still gonna be able to use this as a guide to count number of units. So most of the time, I think it's turned on and never need to feel like it's turned off. Another neat feature in here that a lot of people don't realize is when you are in this straight line mode, you can easily single tap while you're drawing a straight line, and this will actually revert from drawing straight into drawing orthogonally in any direction that you need. So I believe this control is also called tap to toggle. So if you have this turned off, you're not going to revert back to drawing orthogonally. So make sure you have this turned on. So by default, it's turned on, and most of the time I have it turned on. The next control is the triangular control, which I won't really get into too much. There's a couple of features. You can set the angle of the triangle if you want. So I'll let you figure that one out. Now, the Protractor tool we're going to look at next is hugely helpful for landscape designers, garden designers. So when you're planning or doing your layouts, you can use this Protractor tool and set either your radius or diameter for a plant. So let's say for the sake of the demonstration, I'm gonna set the diameter to 6 feet. And you can see this will shrink to exactly where the 6 feet is. So if I'm doing some sort of layout that every like plant needs to be 6 foot from one to the next, what I may do is I might actually consider locking this so this doesn't actually get expanded as I zoom in or zoom out. So you can use this tool to really space plan your plants. And if you need a larger size, let's say I'm done with my 6 feet, but now I need a 12 feet diameter plant, I can easily move this around and start doing my layout with this larger diameter. And the last tool we're going to look at is the stencil. So once we click on here, you can see there is a stencil by default that was selected the previous time that I used it. So in the stencil library, what you will see is Morpholio Trace actually will give you a library of different creators that were made by different creators. And this is a good starting point, but it's not very exhaustive and it's not very abundant either. So it can be a good starting point to get some simple geometries and shapes in here. But if you're a landscape architect and you have your own, let's say, plant stencils or a library, I think you really want to create your own. So this is example of a stencil library that I've created for myself and for my landscape students. So you can easily bring a stencil that I've created before, which you can download completely for free on my website. So you can easily take one of these stencils, let's say this one, for example, and you can click done, and this will be loaded in as a custom stencil. So for area, let's say I'm gonna build a new layer and I'm gonna move this stencil. Let's say this stencil is going to be for this larger tree, and I'm gonna select my bucket tool and then just to color this in this purple. So this is the kind of things that you can do on your own if you have a existing library of stencils, maybe not for plants, but maybe for FF&E or other things that you can reuse from your AutoCAD days or from other libraries that you can pull in together and to really build your own. The only downside I would say this is not shareable. So you can, while you can create this for yourself, you can't share it with a coworker or someone else. So this is really not as convenient. If there was, let's say, a button to share this template very easily with someone. So there is actually another option to bring in custom stencils with colors, for example, and I'll leave this video just right here above for you can check out next. Okay, so we're nearly done, and in the home stretch, we're gonna look at this export option. So in this export dialog, what we have right now is we can export to PDF, image, Photoshop file, vector file, which is really, really new and recent as I've making this video, and project. And project is really just exporting this as a native Morpholio Trace file that you can share with a colleague for them to be able to download and import into their own iPad to either continue your work or do something else. So that's a really good option for file sharing if you want to give it to someone else, or let's say if you're an architect and you're sharing this file to collaborate with a landscape architect to do things outside of the building. So for now, I will just explain the most important one, which is this actually the PDF export and this vector and project file. They're really easy for you to figure out on your own. And by quality in here, you always, when I say always, there's really no reason to select the good or better. Just go for the best quality. This is going to give you that 4K resolution. And now we're on this page, and this page is a little confusing because it doesn't have any options to explain what each of these does. So the most important one that you need to be concerned with is this layer tab. So these other two I really won't get into because they're not important. This is exporting what you have on screen. This is exporting the original background PDF that you can export in vector base. But this is the one that I think 99% of the people will actually be using. So in this view, you're gonna see every layer that is currently turned on in the file can be exported as a view. So what this is good for is if you want to export multiple layers as their own PDF, if there is a reason for that, this can be helpful. However, in most of the time, what I will demonstrate here is if I just go back a couple of steps and if I just turn on some of my drawings in here, just bear with me here. So this is enough. So let's go back to the same menu where we're in the layers tab. What you'll see right now is if everything you're ready to export and everything you see in here is a layer that's currently being turned on, which is probably not what we want because we might not be interested to, export some of these layers just with colors by themselves. So what you have to do right now is actually just to turn off the layers that you don't want to export and actually just leave the layer you do want to export. So for example, let's say this is the drawing or the layer that with information that you do want to export. And here we have controls for the paper size, the print scale, whether we want to export the information on that particular layer or whether we want to export all the layers that are currently being turned on. And I would say this title block that you get by default, which I rarely use, but this is what I've talked about in the very beginning. If you have a company logo, you can put this title block in there. You can give it an ASK number, you can give it a name, a date, and your name. And this is what you can do by default. There is another way to bring in a custom title block, which is I think a little bit more intermediate and next level that I can actually explain in a separate video. But by default, I don't usually have this checked. What's important to me is if I wanted to plot this out on a arc size D, which is 24 by 36 inch paper, if I wanted to plot this out on a 1/4 inch, this is how big this paper will look on a 1/4 inch size plan. And I think you just saw what I did here was a single tap to orange my drawing anywhere that I need to. So if at any point your drawing is kind of off the page, you can use this here to bring it back and center it. So this is what's going to look like on 24 by 36 at 1/4 inch scale, which you can easily bring into InDesign and set a scale. Or, if you wanted to, let's say, print this at home, if your printer can only print up to 11 by 17 at home, at 11 by 17, this 1/4 inch is way too big for this paper size, right? So in this case, we probably want to put it on a 1/4 inch, which will fit actually pretty nicely on 11 by 17. So you can either handwrite your scale and the drawing information on the drawing itself, or you can use the title block to really give it so let's say I'm going to tap in this area. Actually, I'm going to tap in here. And this is going to say, let's say this is scale 1/8. So this is what I can do very quickly and write in this window. And when I am ready to export, what I'll do is just click on this export button one more time. And this is going to give you a host of menu to choose from. So that just take a little bit while to load up. So for me, because I'm operating on a Mac computer, I can easily airdrop it to myself. Or if you are on PC, you can easily save it to the same Dropbox folder that you already have linked up. Or you can save it to the file locally on the iPad and find a way to get it out of there. Or you can link up Google Drive or iCloud. Or if you're working a large firm or a company, you can actually have the server set up on the iPad. So when you are ready, you can upload whatever files that you need directly to the server and retrieve it from the server as well. We've only scratched the surface with this beginner's guide, but just knowing about the features alone isn't enough. It's about integrating them effectively into your existing workflow for architecture, interior, and landscape design. So if you are ready to take the next step, I've provided many case studies that you can download and explore on your own iPad, which you can grab them using the link below.